they just see it as content, and they don't see, you know, a video or that calls Muslims rapists and criminals as anything different from like a cat video. It's a very detached, very kind of nihilistic view, and they just see everything as content first before it has any, you know, political meaning.
Persecution, corruption, and even murder. In this summer series, we look at some jaw-dropping investigations done by journalists across Europe. What do their stories reveal about the state of European democracy? And what impact did they have on society and on the journalists themselves? This is a podcast by the investigative newsroom Follow the Money. I'm your host, Emily Chazinier, and I'm joined by Lise Witteman, founder of Follow the Money's Brussels desk and my co-host for the summer. AI-generated videos are flooding social media. Some are harmless, but others spread lies about immigrants and Muslims. And behind this, a new business is booming. Journalist Niamh McIntyre traced the people behind this new form of misinformation. She joins us today to talk about who is cashing in and how Meta turns outrage into profit. Welcome, Niamh. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, great. Happy to be here.
Could you just start by telling a little bit about yourself and the outlet that you work for?
Yeah, sure. My name's Niamh McIntyre, and I'm a senior reporter on the technology team at the Bureau of Investigative Journalism. We're based in London, and we're an independent investigative media outlet and the technology team. And we also look at AI and the way that AI is changing society. And so that's how we ended up looking at the strange new world of commercial AI slop.
And before we start talking about what AI slop is exactly, let's enter your investigation through an example that you also use in your story. So we're talking about a video of an avatar that looks like the now former Prime Minister of the UK, Keir Starmer, standing in London in an Islamic dress saying, "Oh, we're still a proud Muslim country." That's what the avatar says. Our crazy, violent Muslim immigrants, including our precious criminals and rape gangs, are the bedrock of our society. How did you stumble across that video?
So this was a video doing the rounds on UK Facebook. It was AI generated, and yeah, it showed our former Prime Minister dressed as if he was an Islamic cleric, saying some really offensive things about Muslims, and it had got around like 1 million views. So it had been widely watched. And we came across it because we do a lot of monitoring of AI generated political content online. It was being very offensive about Muslims. But the crazy thing was that after we did a bit of digging, we found out that the person who had posted it was actually a very devout Muslim man himself, which obviously begs the question, why would somebody be doing that?
What trail did you have to follow to get to the creator?
Yeah, basically through some links between this Facebook account, Britain Today, which didn't have any information about who was behind it, and then some of his other social accounts. He had left some identifying information by which we were able to then find a personal account. We didn't want to name him because we discovered that he was based in Pakistan, which is obviously quite a religious country, and we felt that there could be some risk to him from probably like vigilantes and stuff like that. Like, we did get a lot of people after we published the story commenting, emailing us saying, "Who's this guy? Like, we want to go." So yeah, we haven't revealed that, but we identified it ourselves.
And without naming this guy, what can you tell us about who he is?
Yeah, well, what we did, because the other great thing from the story perspective was that he actually was very open to being interviewed. So my colleague Misbah, who is an Urdu speaker, she spoke with him at length in his own language. So he told us a relative amount about himself. Like, he he came from quite a humble background in a small city in Pakistan. He said that before he'd kind of got into AI-generated content creation, he'd been kind of struggling financially, and that this line of work had really like transformed the circumstances of his life. He said that he was making $1,500 US a month, which for the part of Pakistan that he was in, that's like really good wage. And then I suppose the other aspect of the story that was most compelling was that he was clearly a man of some religious conviction. He used a title which is like reserved for people who have memorized the entire Quran. Like I said, he had these other pages where he's sharing Quran verses and Islamic teachings. When my colleague asked him, but, why are you posting this content that is criticizing Muslims and spreading kind of harmful stereotypes, he sort of tried to say he hadn't quite understood what was going on, which we think probably isn't entirely true.
But he created this content, right?
Well, this is the thing. This is the whole thing about this industry. Like, they outsource almost the entire working process to AI. It's more like he'll see something that's doing well on UK Facebook and run it through an AI text generator, run it through an AI image generator, sometimes even just like taking content from X or TikTok and like moving it to Facebook. So I think he would say, I just find content and like repurpose it.
The case of this devout Muslim creating anti-Muslim content is not a standalone case. It's actually part of a wider trend that we call AI slop. Could you explain what this AI slop is?
Broadly, it's just mass-produced, low-quality content that has been produced with AI to some degree, and it could be text that's produced with AI. It could be images. It could be videos.
This is not just about creating videos. It's also about creating money. But what is the business model behind this?
We've looked particularly at Meta.
Meta being Facebook,
yes.
Instagram.
Yeah, Meta being the parent company for Facebook and Instagram. And Meta, almost the entirety of its 200 billion revenue comes from advertising. They don't really have any other line of business. And so advertisers will pay Meta a certain amount of money to serve ads to a particular audience. And because Meta wants to incentivize content creators to make content that will engage their users, they will share some of that advertising revenue with the content creators. And there are various factors that determine how much advertising revenue you as a creator will get, but it's broadly based on how well your content performs, but also things like who watches your content and where they are. So advertisers are going to be paying more to try and reach audiences in like the UK and Europe than they are to try and reach audiences in Pakistan, which then creates this kind of industry where there's lots of people in South Asia who will be targeting US, UK, European audiences, because then they can get a greater share of the advertising.
And for these advertisers, as a company, I wouldn't really like my advertisement to be shown as part of racist content.
Yeah.
But am I the example or the exception? Or how does it work?
No, well, this is a really interesting point, I think. Because if you think about older forms of advertising, if you're a company, you would have said, okay, let's put an ad in this newspaper, and you would know where it went and broadly the kind of content your ad was being shown next to. But now If you're advertising on Meta, you as an advertiser, you basically have no idea where your ad is served, and that is a real problem for accountability, obviously, because the companies have no idea if they are funding the creation of racist AI slop.
So the basic way that this works, so Meta gets money from those advertisers, and the more time people spend on their platforms, the more money they get. And so those content creators serve in creating a reason basically for people to stay on their platform. And then it happens to be the case that this very hateful, racist content actually is what makes people stay on Facebook.
Yeah, broadly, yeah. I think these content creators, they're not like an anomaly. They're not an exception. They're not like rogue actors. They're actually kind of, in a way, producing the internet that big tech companies and AI companies want, because they create compelling content. They keep people engaged for ages. They outsource the vast majority of their workflow to AI. In a way, they're really just the exemplar of a kind of contemporary, like online business. Meta does have an interest in facilitating this kind of content, or at least not doing anything to really try and find it and take it down. Because, when we were talking about the Pakistani guy, it didn't take that much work for me to figure out, like, okay, who this guy is, and the fact that he was posting really offensive content.
Meta could have done the same.
Meta could have done that I'm just a woman with a laptop. They're one of the most powerful and wealthiest companies in the world.
When you put your findings to them, to Meta, what was their response?
So they did take down a lot of accounts that we flagged, and then they just kind of gave us a bland sort of one-line statement that didn't really address. But
it was like, thank you for flagging.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and so, just the sort of we have community guidelines and we enforce them was sort of their
because
point.
it is in their guidelines to not have offensive material online.
Yeah, and I think this is often the way it works. They only really act on things when journalists have already done all of the work and found the offensive content, and then they'll say, "Oh yeah, okay, we'll take it down."
It's not just about people creating content like this. You even came across someone that was teaching others how to create content like this and also making money off that, which also I think really signifies how booming this business is. Can you tell us about this guy? Who is he?
So this Sri Lankan creator we did name in the story because he's very public about his work. His name is Geeth Suryapura, and he's based in Sri Lanka. He calls himself the Facebook ads king, and he claims that he's made like hundreds of thousands of US dollars through Facebook ad revenue. And certainly he appeared to be living like a very nice life in Sri Lanka. He liked to, show off his nice watches and his cars and doing tequila shots with the boys in like a nice hotel. And he, like a lot of people who work in this industry, they make their money by running Facebook pages, getting a share of the advertising revenue, but they also do have another good income stream, which is selling courses. And effectively how it works is you'll pay this guy a small amount of money for access to some kind of like video seminars. He basically will kind of break down his method, which is, right from the start of, okay, how do you set up a page and then qualify for the monetization? He spoke about specific topics as well to his students. Like he said, he really recommended any immigration related topic does well because it sparks engagement. People have strong opinions about it. He said he targeted old people particularly because he felt like they were the ones who were most receptive. He's very good at what he does, and he's trained a lot of other Sri Lankans personally, and cultivated kind of a community. Like, there was an amazing video we were watching where he filmed himself kind of like giving some cake out to his students who were targeting the UK audiences. It was like, yeah, these guys have like hit these numbers. He bought them all chocolate cake to celebrate how well it was doing. It was kind of wholesome in a way.
Did you ever confront any of these teachers with what you found, and how did they react to that?
My colleague spoke to him briefly, I think, before he necessarily knew that we were going to, write the news story that we were going to write. But then when we went to him with all these examples saying, you've posted content saying Islam is a cancer and other like very offensive things like that, his response was, I don't encourage my students to spread violence. I only teach Facebook monetization. And then the response from the Pakistani creator was a bit different in that he said, oh, my English isn't good. I didn't know that the content was offensive. But I think what's interesting with both of them is that both of their responses, I think, just really exemplify like such a detachment from the content of what they're posting, like
the narrative that you're promoting.
Yeah, I think they just see it as content, and they don't see, a video that calls Muslims rapists and criminals as anything different from like a cat video. It's a very detached, very kind of nihilistic view. And they just see everything is content first before it has any, political meaning. And I think in that way, yeah, they really exemplify a whole kind of modern philosophy on the internet, really, like everything.
For them, this content is a way of making money, and not much more than that. But I was wondering, what do these videos mean to you, and what is sort of the societal impact that you see?
Yeah. This is always a hard question to answer because it's hard to draw like a neat line between, somebody saw this video online and this is how they behaved offline. But I think just me as somebody who lives in the UK, the tropes in the videos, just from looking at the way that UK Facebook users seem to be engaging with the content, like if I'm looking at the comments, it really is quite concerning. It will be like, one of these videos that uses AI to show migrants drowning, and people will be like laughing at that, saying, the Navy should shoot all these boats down. And obviously it's an AI generated video and they're not talking about an incident that actually happened, but they are kind of engaging in like a fantasy where you're talking about tens of people drowning, which is quite horrible.
It's shifting the boundaries of the conversation in a sense.
Yeah. I don't get the sense that people are deceived by AI generated content. Like, I don't think, obviously the video generators, they are getting better all the time. They are getting more realistic. It is harder to tell, they don't generate like people that have like 3 fingers or things like that as often as they used to. But I think it really allows people to engage in like a fantasy and like blur the line between fantasy and reality in a way that I think is quite dangerous as well. Like, a lot of the sort of less extreme versions of this kind of content that I see will be like a very nostalgic content about what the UK used to be like. Like you used to be able to leave your doors unlocked and there was no crime, and we were all such a cohesive community. We all got along, etc. And even that is like sort of completely ahistorical. But because you have AI, I think it gives shape to a fantasy, and it like solidifies it.
Recently, Facebook Meta stopped a lot of its content moderation. They really scaled back the amount of resources spent on that. What does this mean in that whole story?
I think the second Trump presidency has also had quite an interesting effect on all of this because since then, a lot of, not just Meta, all the major social platforms have kind of retreated from content moderation, partly because, the Trump position was that social media platforms were like censoring right-wing speech. And, Mark Zuckerberg, he kind of even made like a quite rare public speech on this topic when Trump got reelected, saying we are going to do less content moderation, we're going to allow more speech. And then also it obviously saves them money because they can lay off all of the people who were trying to find offensive content and take it down.
So a lot of the political pressure to actually do something about this has also disappeared.
Yeah, I think so. Certainly there have been thousands and thousands of people who've lost their jobs who used to work in that kind of stuff. And AI is a factor there too, because the companies, they don't specifically say, we're doing less of this because the political context has changed. They say, we've got AI that can detect content. We don't need humans to do it anymore. But I think the evidence for that is, it's questionable.
The UK and the EU has policies set up to scrutinize these companies. Can you elaborate a bit more on that?
In the UK, we've just had the Online Safety Act, which is quite a broad and unwieldy piece of legislation. But in theory, it will impose stronger penalties on tech platforms for all kinds of violations.
So is this similar to Europe's Digital Services Act that is set up to indeed also scrutinize the content, make sure there's no violations of the laws as we know it in Europe?
Yeah, I think they have some similarities and some differences. I think the DSA goes a bit further in some ways. And I think also our Online Safety Act is a bit earlier in terms of implementation. I think with all of these things, the problem is often the actual enforcement. Like I think there's lots of interesting provisions in the DSA. Like I think the one that I thought was particularly interesting was around algorithmic feeds and like addictive design. Saying that users should have an option to not have an algorithmic feed. The huge structural problem here is like the algorithmic feed that prioritizes like sensational content that really provokes strong emotion. So I think trying to have at least some effort to give users the option to not participate in that is really interesting. But I think obviously tech companies of the scale that we're talking about, like Meta and X, just have kind of limitless resources to appeal and fight any kind of penalty.
And you
legally.
see them doing that in practice as well.
Yeah, very very much so. It's still worth doing, but yeah, I think it's the enforcement side that is really hard. And like often tech companies are more powerful than individual.
So could you explain why indeed these governments are not stepping up more? Because they're in a sense ruining, of course, the democratic debate.
The Trump presidency is very keen to promote the interests of American tech companies. European governments are aware that if they try and strongly regulate any American tech companies, there will be some kind of consequence for that. There's that reason to why they haven't regulated too strongly. And then I think there's also just technology and the way that people use technology just evolves so quickly that it's actually quite hard for regulation to keep up. Like this whole commercial AI slop that we've been investigating is actually really new. And I think people still think of online misinformation in the kind of form that it took in the previous decade when it was somebody who was politically motivated. Maybe it was even like, it might have been a PR company, or it might have been a actor from another state or whatever who was making content to try and influence people for political reasons. And I think, part of the reason we've been in, covering this strand a lot is because we think it's really important to understand that like now a lot of misleading and harmful content online is just produced purely commercially. And we're way behind, I think, like politicians and regulators understanding that.
All right. Then that's where we'll leave it for today. Thank you so much for joining us, Niamh. And Lisa and I will be back soon for another episode.